great theologian Matthew Henry once said, "It ought to be the business of every day to prepare for our last day." American writer Robert Fulghum came to grips with this truth one day on a New Year's Day of 1994. He sat in a lawn chair on his gravesite. I know, a strange way to start the year, maybe a morbid way to start a new year. But Fulghum calls it a, quote, ritual of reckoning, and that it was one of the most affirmative and potent experiences of his life. Why? He was 56 years old at the time, but he later said these words. He said, "More than a grave, the site has become a workshop and a laboratory. I go there when the muddy springs of my mind need cleaning." What is he doing? He's reflecting on what matters most. You see, legacy begins with the end in mind. But if you never take any time to reflect on what your legacy is going to be, how many of you know you probably aren't going to leave the legacy ultimately that you would hope to leave? It requires extraordinary intentionality. So today, as we conclude our series, I want to take a little bit of time to focus on a piece of this equation that is extraordinarily important. Before we do that, let me remind you of what we have said all throughout this series, and it's simply this truth, and that is that if you want to leave a legacy worth remembering when you die, you have to write a legacy worth recording while you're alive. Legacy will happen, but the legacy you want to leave will not happen haphazardly. It does not happen randomly. You will leave a legacy. The question is, will it be one that you're proud to leave? Good legacies don't happen by accident, and over this series, we've kind of given you a diagram, and we're actually going to give this to you in writing before you leave today, but a little bit of a diagram to help us remember what the various elements of legacy are. And in this series, we've talked about 3 of these legacy-making ingredients, things that shape the kind of legacy we'll ultimately leave. The first one being character. Character is all about who you are. It's about your integrity. It's about your spirituality. It's about your pliability in the hands of God as He forms and He shapes you. And then the second one is connection. Connection is all about who you impact with your life, the people that you invest in, the people that you mentor, the people that you that are closest to you, that you're going to be able to make the greatest difference in. In fact, we've shared with you in this series as well a definition of success. That success in our world so often is about accumulation and achievement and accomplishment, and yet true success is when the people who know you best love and respect you the most. That's connection. The third piece is contribution. And contribution is taking the resources that God has entrusted you with, time and talent and treasure and influence, and choosing to steward it with God's intentions in mind, saying, God, I want to contribute back. I want to give back what you've entrusted to me to make a difference for your kingdom, to make a difference in our world. And at the center of all of these is an eternal value. A recognition that what lasts beyond today is what matters most. It's a recognition that as I focus on my character and connection and contribution, that I'm doing so with eternity in mind. Over the last 3 weeks, we've taken a deep dive on character, connection, and contribution. Today, we're wrapping up by looking at what is this eternal value really all about. And that's where I want to focus our attention today. Why is an eternal value central to our legacy? Here's the reason why. Because one day, each one of us will face a final inspection. Now, I don't know what comes to your mind when you hear the word final inspection. One of the things that comes to my mind is if you buy or sell a house. If you buy or sell a house, before you close on that house, there's likely going to be a final inspection. Why? It protects the buyer to make sure they're not buying a lemon, right? They don't go into it blind. They understand that, okay, yeah, here's what's wrong with this house, if there's anything wrong, and I need to know that before I make my final purchasing decision. And that might actually affect the negotiation of the cost of the house. Several years ago, Karen and I discovered this firsthand. We bought a house, and this place, I'm just going to tell you right now, it was a dump, okay? Everything about it needed to be fixed, except for the kitchen and the bathroom, which were the two most expensive parts of the house, right? And so we were like, great. So we get this, but it's a dump. I mean, the carpet, I don't know, it's probably at least 30 years old. The walls were just, scratched up, just a mess. It stunk. The yard was a mess. When you walked outside onto the back patio, the patio had this had been framed with metal studs all around it, but the studs were not fastened to the concrete. And so you could literally push against the wall and it would swing, okay? That's not normal, okay? That's not supposed to happen. But with this particular house, it did. And so we buy this place, and we started spending every Saturday there just working to get it up to what it needed to be. And we had an electrician work on the electrical. We had a plumber come in because the washer and dryer was on the back patio, and we thought it'd probably be good to put that inside the house instead of outside. So we had the plumbing run to make that happen. We had the whole back patio ripped out and it kind of framed up to look nice, got the yard cut, flowers planted, bushes, all of that. And when it was done, it looked really good. And so new carpet, everything. And so then we put it on the market, and we put it on the market, and we have someone that's interested in buying it, and then it is time for the final inspection. And I'm feeling good because we did it right. Like, we just made a commitment. We're going to do this right. We're going to do it well. We're going to make sure things are done in a way that is, that's just right. And so I thought, we're going to pass this final inspection, no problem. And so the inspector shows up, and I asked her, I said, how long is it going to take to do the inspection? And she said, about 4 hours. And I'm thinking, this house ain't that big. And I was like, okay. She does the inspection, and then I get a 21-page report on her inspection. Now, not 21 pages of what's wrong with the house, but a 21-page report. And let me tell you something. It was detailed. So detailed that they would even tell you if there were too many leaves in the gutter. Like, it was detailed. And thankfully, there wasn't anything major, and we were able to sell the house, and all was good. But here's what I discovered in that process, that final inspection, they combed that house with a fine-tooth comb, looking to see, is there anything wrong? Which is a good thing. Because in that moment, you want to make sure what you're buying isn't something you're later going to regret. One day, all of us are going to face a final inspection. But it's not going to be from a housing inspector. It's not going to be from a boss, and it's not going to be from a professor. It's going to be an inspection by the Lord. And that inspection from God is a little daunting whenever you think about it, right? Because I don't know about you, but when I think about that, there's a piece of us that we kind of go, well, how the heck am I going to pass that inspection? And yet the Apostle Paul talks about this inspection throughout his letters and what that inspection will look like and what we can do to pass that final inspection. So today, as we conclude our series, I want to look at how do we pass the final inspection. It all centers around this idea of an eternal value that is at the center of what we do and why we do it. So the first piece of the final inspection is the right foundation. The right foundation, and this is who I serve. Who I serve. This, I'll just say right out of the gate, this is the most important key of all. And Paul addresses the right foundation in his first letter to the church in Corinth, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning in verse number 9. This is what Paul says. Or to put it another way, you are God's house, using the gift God gave me as a good architect. I designed blueprints. Apollos is putting up the walls. Let each carpenter who comes on, something doesn't make sense here. Take care to build on the foundation. We'll go there, all right? Remember, there is only one foundation, the one already laid in Jesus Christ. What does the Apostle Paul mean in this passage? Paul is talking about the roles that each one of us play in his kingdom as his work is carried out on earth. He's saying that all of us have gifts that God has entrusted to us, and with these gifts, we are to serve people and make a difference. And we talked about that last week, right? When we were talking about contribution, we talked about our gifts and our abilities and our time and our skill and our influence and our treasure, like taking these gifts and using them for purposes that matter beyond just ourselves. And then to drive this point home, Paul compares the entire idea to building a house. And he says, you know what? I designed the blueprints. Apollos, he put up the walls. Other people, they're carpenters that are doing their part of the work as well. But then Paul makes an essential point. And the point is this, that regardless of what role each one of us plays, we are all building on a foundation. Like you can throw up walls, you can put on a roof, you can finish it out. But we're all building on a foundation. And for some people, the foundation that they are building their life on is money. And for some people, the foundation they're building their life on is their family. And for some people, it's their work. And for some people, it's their good works. But hear me, none of these, not even good works, are a good foundation for your life. Doesn't mean they're not important, but to be the very foundation of your life, that doesn't work. Paul says there's only one foundation that will last, and it is Jesus Christ. He is the ultimate foundation of our life. He is the firm foundation of our lives. In fact, in his letter to the church in Ephesus, Paul writes these words, Ephesians 2, verse 8 and 9. He says, God saved you by what? His grace, when you believed. And then he makes it very clear, our role here. He says, you cannot take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done. Let me read that again. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. Paul's making it very clear. Hey, the foundation of your life must be Christ, and by the way, you don't get any credit for that. It is the grace of God on your behalf that he can be the very foundation of your life. None of us deserve credit for that. None of us can do anything to earn that. None of us are getting salvation as a reward for the good things we have done. No, salvation is for the good things he has done, that Christ has done on our behalf when he gave his life at the cross, when he paid the penalty of our sin, whenever he was nailed to the cross, whenever he was buried, and then he rose from the dead and defeated death, hell, and the grave. Friend, you and I cannot do that for ourselves. Only Christ can do that. And salvation is based on what Christ did, not what we do. So if you're going to pass the final inspection at the end of life, the first question you have to answer is my life built on the foundation of Jesus Christ? This is not just a question. It is the most important question. Of the four things I'm going to share with you today, this one is the one that matters most. Without this one, let me just tell you, point 2, 3, and 4 don't even matter. Point 1, the right foundation, who I serve. Here's the second key to passing the final inspection, and that is the right materials. Now, this is a little strange because when you think about materials, you think about like something you physically own, but the contrast here is a little bit different. So when I talk about the right materials, it's really about what I do with what God has entrusted to me. And we talked about that last week. The right materials. On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina decimated the Gulf Coast, right? And if you were alive at that time or young or old enough to remember, you saw the devastation that took place across the Gulf Coast in New Orleans and everywhere. Well, about 8 months after Hurricane Katrina hit, I was in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I was speaking at this church there. And I remember I was staying at the pastor's home, and I remember we pulled into one of the pastor's neighborhoods from this church, and it was the most odd thing. Because when we pulled in, it's like you saw houses in different parts of the neighborhood that were kind of standing there, but it wasn't like there were houses that were just all in a row like a normal neighborhood, right? It was like it was a new neighborhood where houses were slowly popping up, but it wasn't a new neighborhood. And so there were these houses that were popping up, and then there were all of these slabs with nothing on them. And I remember seeing that and asking the pastor, I said, like what happened here? He said, well, whenever the hurricane hit, he said it quite literally took entire homes out to sea. Just removed them from their foundation and gone. And when I said, wait a minute, time out. I said, are you saying this is what it looked like whenever you showed back up? He said, yeah. I mean, there was nothing on the foundation. Just completely gone. And when I saw that, the first thing I thought was the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew when he says that there's a wise builder and there's a foolish builder. And the wise builder builds his house on the rock and the foolish builder builds his house on the sand. And when the storm hits, what happens? The house built on the rock, it stands. But the house that's built on the sand, it's destroyed, right? It's washed out to sea. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But the second thing is this, okay. They all had a foundation, and the foundation is still there, but the rest of the house isn't. So what is the house built of that stayed versus the house that got washed out to sea? And the same question arises spiritually. What is it that allows there to be more of our life that in the end is left where it's not just the foundation, but like the whole house remains at the end of our life? Paul answers that question. In, again, his letter to the church in Corinth, 1 Corinthians 3, here's what Paul describes this as. He says, but there are various kinds of materials that can be used to build on that foundation. Some use gold and silver and jewels, and some build with sticks and hay or even straw. Now, again, Paul's not talking about a physical structure. He's contrasting building a house with building our lives spiritually. And he says, hey, when they build their spiritual house, it's built with gold, silver, and jewels, and some it's, hay and straw and wood and yeah, this is like serious. And then so you ask the obvious question, right? Well, then what is gold and silver and jewels like? What does that even mean? And what is sticks and hay or straw? What does that even mean? Here's what it means. When you look at those two things, they play out as the investments that we are making. It's what we talked about last week when we talked about with your life making an investment with your time and your talent and your treasure and your influence. Here's the difference between the two. Gold, silver, and jewels equals investing our time, talent, and treasure and influence in what? The eternal. He's saying when you build your spiritual life with gold, silver, and jewels, he's not talking about literal gold, silver, and jewels. He's contrasting here. He's saying that's when you invest what God has entrusted to you for things that matter for eternity. But sticks, hay, and straw, that's investing our time, talent, treasure, and influence in the temporal. In the temporal. And he says at the end of life, what's going to be left standing? When the storm blows in, what is going to be left standing? Why is this important? Why does it even matter? Paul tells us in the very next verse. Look what he says, verse 13. He says, there is going to come a time of testing of Christ's judgment day to see what kind of material each builder has used. Everyone's work will be put through the fire so that all can see whether or not it keeps its value and what was really accomplished. Wow. A time of testing on Christ's judgment day. Friend, there's two different types of judgment we read about in Scripture. One type of judgment is what's known as the Great White Throne Judgment. But that, and here's the good news, that, my friend, if you're a follower of Jesus, is not for you. You pass that test, not because of what you did, but because of what Christ did on your behalf, and you opening your heart to confess that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, receiving his grace and his mercy and his forgiveness of sin. And friend, guess what? You don't face that judgment because Christ faced it for you when he bore our sin at the cross. But there's a second judgment that we will all face, and it's the judgment seat of Christ. And this is a judgment not for whether or not you get into heaven. This is a judgment for what you did with what God entrusted you with. We will give an account for that. In fact, in Hebrews 9:27, the writer says it like this: everyone must die once, and after that be judged by God. Wow. That's pretty sobering, isn't it? What you do with what you have matters today and for eternity. Hear me, friend. Our good works don't get us to heaven, but our good works will be judged in heaven. And so, what materials are you building with? Are you taking the time, talent, treasure, and influence God has entrusted you with and using it purely for temporal purposes or for eternal purposes? And I know you can hear that and you might say, but Stephen, my job doesn't seem like it's really connected to eternity. Well, first off, it's not just about your job, so let's make that clear. But secondly, your job, no matter what you do, is connected to eternity, and you're going to see that in just a moment. So what are you building with? What are you building with? That brings us to the third part of the final inspection, and that is the right workmanship. So if the right materials are what I do, the right workmanship is how I do it. How I do it. How you use your time, talent, treasure, and influence matters. And again, Paul makes this clear when he's writing his letter to the believers in Colossae. He's writing to the Colossians, and this is what he says, Colossians 3:23, whatever you do is whatever you do, okay? Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Notice, whatever you do is your action. And work at it with all your heart is your attitude. With your actions and your attitudes, whatever you do, Paul is saying, make sure it is quality. Make sure it brings honor to God. Make sure you're doing this, not as though you're working for your boss, but as though you're working for the Lord himself. What Paul is saying is, because you are working for the Lord. Why is this important? It's important because of the very next verse. Verse 23, he says this, but verse 24, he says, since, in other words, do this, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. You see, what you do matters, and how you do it also matters. What you do and how you do it, Paul is making it clear, actually has eternal implications. Wait a minute, Stephen, what do you mean it has eternal implications? Are you saying that when I'm delivering the mail, it has eternal implications? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Are you saying that whenever I'm constructing that house, or I'm pouring that foundation with concrete, or I'm working on that consulting proposal, or are you saying that actually has eternal implications? That's exactly what I'm saying. Actually, that's exactly what Paul is saying. He's saying that what you do matters, but how you do it also matters, and it brings with it an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. So as you do what you do, there is something that is being stored up in heaven. If the heart is right, if the attitude is right. So how you treat your neighbor matters. How you serve your customer, how you listen to your coworker, how you care for your classmate, how hard you work on the job and your work ethic, all of it matters, not just now, but for eternity. You might say, again, Stephen, you don't understand. Like what I do, I just don't think it's really that important. It's not some big high-powered job. Like they could replace me tomorrow if they wanted to. Listen, it might seem that way, but apparently to God, how we work impacts our inheritance in heaven. It has eternal implications. Don't ever underestimate the significance of seemingly insignificant service. It matters. That's right. You'll be rewarded for it, friend. You'll be rewarded for it. So there's the right foundation, there's the right, which is who I serve, and there's the right materials, and that's what I do, and then you get to this whole thing that Paul's talking about, how we go about doing it, the right workmanship. But then he hits one more, and boy, does this one test us, and that's the right motives. Why I do it. In 1 Corinthians 4, Paul hits right at the heart of the work that we do, the motive that we have. This is what he says in verse 5. He says, when the Lord comes, he will turn on the light so that everyone can see exactly what each one of us is really like. That's a scary thought. Deep down in our hearts, holy cow, then everyone will know why we have been doing the Lord's work. At that time, God will give to each one whatever praise is coming to him. He's saying, hey, there's a reward that's coming, but your reward is impacted by your why, your motive for why you do what you do. That's a pretty sobering thought, friend. Because let's just be honest, in our culture, man, it's real easy to do things to just make ourselves look good. It's really easy for ego to get in the way. It's really easy that the driving motivator is, I just want to get rich. I just want to look better in front of my friends. I want to outdo my friend. I can't stand their scroll on social media. It ticks me off, right? I mean, there's a motive sometimes, if we were really honest, if it came into the light and everyone could really see what's going on, we wouldn't be too proud of it. Paul makes it clear that our motives matter. Motives reveal the condition of the heart, and it's no secret God cares deeply about the condition of our hearts. Proverbs 21:2 says it like this: people may be right in their own eyes, but the Lord examines the heart. That's what he's paying attention to. Let me read a simple story that illustrates the importance of motives. I'm going to read this to you, but lean in and listen carefully. Once upon a time, there was a gardener who grew an enormous carrot. So he took it to his king and said, "My lord, this is the greatest carrot I've ever grown or ever will grow. Therefore, I want to present it to you as a token of my love and respect for you." The king was touched and discerned the man's heart. So he turned to go, and the king said, "Wait, you are clearly a good steward of the earth. I own a plot of land right next to yours. I want to give it to you freely as a gift so you can garden it all." And the gardener was amazed and delighted and went home rejoicing. But there was a nobleman at the king's court who overheard all this. And he said, "My, if that is what you get for a carrot, what if you gave the king something better?" So the next day, the nobleman came before the king, and he was leading a handsome black stallion. He bowed low and said, "My lord, I breed horses, and this is the greatest horse I've ever bred or ever will. Therefore, I want to present it to you as a token of my love and respect for you." But the king discerned his heart and said, "Thank you," and took the horse and merely dismissed him. The nobleman was perplexed. So the king said, "Let me explain. The gardener was giving me the carrot, but you were giving yourself the horse." Motive. Our King, Jesus, sees the motive of our heart. Are we really doing it for him, or are we doing it for ourselves? Are we doing it for him, saying, "Lord, out of love and respect for you and devotion to you, I do this all for your glory," we're expecting nothing in return? Or are we saying, "Well, I saw how God blessed them. Maybe he'll do the same for me. So, okay, God." What is the motive of the heart? Friend, God weighs the heart. He knows our motives. And during the final inspection, the motive of the heart will be weighed. Why do we do what we do? Unfortunately, for some, the only reward they will receive when the motive of the heart is weighed will be the reward that they received whenever they did what they did. There will be no eternal reward because they've already received it from man. So, let me bring all 4 points together. Who we serve, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it has eternal ramifications. Wow. That's what Scripture teaches us. And that is the ultimate outcome. Paul goes on in verse 14 and 15 of 1 Corinthians 3, and he kind of sums it up by saying, if the building that had been put on the foundation still stands, the builder will get a reward. In other words, if if what you did and how you did it and why you did it, if it was all to the glory of God, there's going to be a reward for you. But if the building is burned up, and if, in other words, if the hay and the straw, like if it's burned up, the builder will suffer loss. There will be no reward. The builder will be saved, but it will be as one who escaped from a fire. What does that mean? He's saying that you're still going to make it to heaven. You're still going to be saved. Why? Because the foundation was Christ. The problem was what you built on the foundation was all for yourself. So you're going to be saved, not because of what you built, but because you had made a decision to follow Christ. You'd placed your faith and trust in Him. The foundation is there, but there's no reward because everything else was for you. What you build your life on determines if you get into heaven. What you build your life with determines what kind of reward you'll receive when you get there. Let me conclude today and this series by pointing to the danger of what author William Irvine calls misliving. This is what he says. There is a danger that you will mislive. That despite all your activity, despite all the pleasant diversions you might have enjoyed while alive, you will end up living a bad life. There is, in other words, a danger that when you are on your deathbed, you will look back and realize that you wasted your one chance at living. Instead of spending your life pursuing something genuinely valuable, you squandered it because you allowed yourself to be distracted by the various baubles life has to offer. Wow. Let me ask you, friend, are you misliving? Are you misliving? Have you become distracted by the things that just at the end of the day, they don't really matter? Do you have a value for eternity where you're living with the right foundation? Who you serve is Christ and Christ alone. The right materials, that what you're doing, you're taking what God's entrusted to you and you're using it wisely and well for the glory of God. That you're doing the right workmanship, that you work hard, that how you do what you do, like you're doing it with integrity and you're doing it with authenticity and you're doing it as unto the Lord, recognizing He's your ultimate boss. You're doing it with a work ethic that people don't look at you and say, man, they're lazy. And are you doing it for the reasons that matter? Is the motive right and pure? Because when you do, you no longer risk misliving. Instead, you pass the final inspection and you leave a legacy worth remembering. Let's pray.